Hey guys, welcome back to another video. It's me, Mysterious Cameraman, and today we're going to be talking about kind of how Star Wars is heading. Is Star Wars ruined? This could really have many names. I kind of had this idea for this video simply because I've been watching The Acolyte. It's currently very late June, so I think 5 episodes of Acolyte have come out at this point. I've seen all 5, and I'm not really going to be commenting much on Acolyte. I'm not going to be doing a review on that, I don't think. I think I'm just going to quickly give my thoughts. I think the show's fine. I think it's overhated very much. I think people overhate on the show. I actually don't think it's that bad. I think episode 3 was pretty crappy. I won't lie about it. And you can see the messages very much throughout this show. But I actually don't hate it, though. I think the show actually has presented some very interesting themes about the High Republic. Like, I do like the idea of a show set in the High Republic era with, like, this kind of dark force kind of looming almost. I kind of like that idea. I just feel like the leads aren't very interesting. I think Soul's by far the most interesting character. Yeah, I just don't love everything about this show. I feel like it doesn't capture what Star Wars was, almost. Like, I feel like in the prequels, you'd see so many, like, weird-looking Jedi almost. Like, when you look at the Jedi Council, you'd see a lot of, like, you'd see very few human-looking Jedi, I feel. Now, I feel like when you look at the Jedi, it's a lot of humans. So, I don't know, I just don't love everything the show was presenting, but I don't hate it either. But I know a lot of people have been hating The Acolyte, and I know simply a lot of people have been hating Star Wars lately. So we're really going to be not focusing on the prequels or the original trilogy. We're kind of just going to talk about the sequels and really just the Disney Plus format. Pretty much, what can Star Wars do that people will be interested in? Because from how I've seen it, Star Wars has produced 2 really good things post Rise of Skywalker, and that is Mandalorian seasons 1 and 2 and Andor. In my opinion, Andor was the best show they've ever done. I think Mandalorian follows it. I don't think it follows it by a huge margin. But I think Ahsoka as well. Ahsoka I thought was actually pretty solid. I didn't love it compared to the others, but I actually didn't hate it either. I think Ahsoka was actually overloved a little almost. Like, I feel like there was definitely some lower moments of that show. But back to the main topic at hand. I think that when you look at all these shows as a whole, and it's like, how does Star Wars move forward from doing these Disney Plus shows and moves into doing movies or other shows? What do they do next? Because I know originally Acolyte, I believe, was going to be a movie. I know they had a Rogue Squadron movie, and I know they had a 10th Star Wars plan or a Rey starring Star Wars movie. I know Kenobi was also meant to be a movie. I'm going to be honest and say I don't think Star Wars is ever really going to make another movie unless it's Star Wars 10, 11, 12. And I think the reason I say that is because I don't see how they're going to do just more adjacent movies, because people aren't going to watch that. And I know Rise of Skywalker was at the ending of the saga, which it definitely had an ending feel, I guess, but I don't see why that was the ending, and I also don't see how that is the ending, because, yeah, sure, all the Jedi have died out, and Rey gave up being a Jedi, but that doesn't mean there's not more Sith, and it doesn't mean the Jedi, like, yes, there aren't really ways for it to happen, which is why there aren't any shows set after Rise of Skywalker. But I think what the issue that I'm kind of having is the fact that if they were to do another trilogy, it would have to be High Republic, because they can't do a trilogy in between prequels and original, because there wouldn't be a point to that. That would just be Clone Wars, and they wouldn't do one in between original and sequels, because there's nothing to do there, and that's pretty much what all the shows are. I think if they did a Kenobi movie, I think that would have made a ton of money, and I think they really could have made that into a movie, and they kind of ruined if that show was a movie, I think it would have been incredible. I just don't see how Star Wars can make another movie, I feel, because they've told a pretty. They had the through line of the original trilogy, and said let's tell the story before and the story after it. At this point, we know pretty much exactly how everything happens. They can only do something prequel to the prequels, because they can't do anything else really besides that. And I don't see why they do that, because the prequel episode 1, I think, is such a good starting point. And I think if you were to do something like something in between the original and sequel trilogy, I think that's the best place you could do something besides from High Republic. But I don't see what you'd do. Like, you've already done Mandalorian and all that stuff. So I don't see what the point of doing something in that area is. But I think I don't see how Star Wars could ever do another movie. And I think another part of the issue with this is just the fact that Star Wars is nowhere to go at this point. Like, they've told their story, and now they're trying to still make money from it. But there isn't, like, kind of like how Marvel, after Endgame, they still can tell their heroes. But if all of the heroes died, or like they all lost their powers or something, Marvel would be over then. They couldn't do more. So I feel like at this point, I don't see what more Star Wars could do to keep trying to do things. Because sure, High Republic is interesting. And I think each show is presenting interesting ideas. I think Ahsoka presented some really interesting ideas, as well as the stuff with Anakin and all that. I thought they did a lot of very interesting stuff. I think Andor, I would love to see an Andor season 2. But specifically, I think they also did some very interesting things in between the times between the prequels and the original trilogy, and they told the story of the prison and like how the Sith are working in the background almost. I think each show is actually doing very interesting things, but they're not. It's like they're like saying, like, in the writing room, hey, let's just make another Star Wars show. What can we do to make it? And I think characters in Star Wars has kind of lost what made it special, I feel, because just like 5 years ago, there weren't, besides from Mandalorian, which I think actually started around when Rise of Skywalker came out. But Mandalorian was special because Mandalorian actually told an interesting story. Book of Boba Fett was just trying to do Mandalorian a little differently. I think what Marvel has is the fact that they have a rich, like, group of heroes, so they could do a longer thing in shows that they also don't think would make money in theaters. Like, Miss Marvel probably wouldn't make any money in theaters. But, like, Marvel isn't making the best choices on what should be a show and a movie, but I think they at least have a reason to do shows. Star Wars is like, they have the story, now they're telling all these miniature stories. But eventually they're going to either A, run out of miniature stories, or kind of just bankrupt Star Wars. Because there's only so many times you can tell the same story. I think so many people I've heard have loved seeing the non-Jedi side of Star Wars, which we saw in Book of Boba Fett, Mandalorian, Andor specifically, really. And I think it would be so cool to see more stuff like that. But I feel like we've also seen so much of the Star Wars universe. Like, I feel like even in Mandalorian, when we'd go to a new world, we'd get so much background on this new area, this new setting that we are in, and why this place is now important. But in these newer shows, it's like, oh, we're now just on another planet. Oh, on this planet we now have a Wookiee, like, Jedi. And it kind of takes away from the wonder of Star Wars. I think if they want to do other Star Wars things and they want to do, like, projects, then they could cut down on it. In this year alone, we've had Mandalorian. I'm talking, let's just say, in the past 2 years. So, from September 2022 to now, we've had Andor, Mandalorian Season 3, Ahsoka, and Acolyte. I feel like we're getting 2 shows a year. Because whenever the show started in 2021, we got, I don't remember exactly when Mandalorian Season 1 and 2 came out, but in 2021 to 2022, we got, well, let's just say in 2021, we got Mandalorian, I think, and I think we got Mandalorian Season 2 in 2021, and we also got Book of Boba Fett was next year. So, Book of Boba Fett, In 2022, we got Book of Boba Fett, Kenobi, and Andor. 3 shows. In 2023, we got Ahsoka and Mandalorian Season 3. And in 2024, we got currently just Acolyte. Which might not seem like a lot, but 2 shows a year, even though that's like less like something like Marvel, that's still about a little less. There's no, like, these shows. Why are they pumping out 2 a year? Honestly, I think Star Wars would thrive more if they said, let's stop all the shows. And I heard they're doing a Mandalorian movie. I think that's they're working on that. Let's do a movie every 3 years. And it's like kind of like the Solo or Rogue One. Obviously, Solo and Rogue One didn't do as well as the other movies, which is why they probably won't make that many. But I think they could even say, like, Star Wars, like, there isn't many places for it to go because they ended the trilogy, the saga, and they ended it pretty bad. But, like, unless they contradict it, there's nowhere for them to go with the story that would then lead to more stories being able to be told. I just don't see what they could do that could make that they could keep telling stories, because they haven't told many good stories. So I think that's the issue that Star Wars has run into, is the fact that they decided, let's do another trilogy, which was a good move in my opinion. But then they were like, let's have this be the final trilogy, which I think was a pretty stupid decision, especially from Disney. And then for them to be like, let's have writers all do it, which is another really bad thing, how they're having a room of writers write it, and it's a committee writing Star Wars. That's terrible. And you can hear anyone talk about that. But I don't think many YouTubers or other reviewers talk about the fact that Star Wars just doesn't have anywhere to go anymore. I think they're always like, oh my god, they're written by a committee and so, like, woke and stuff. But no one's mentioning the fact that there's nowhere else for their story to go. So if they do other movies, I think Star Wars has kind of done everything they can do. Like, Marvel, I feel like, even though they have hit Endgame and now they are in, like, their movies aren't as good, I'm going to admit. There are some movies that are even better than phases 1, 2, and 3. But they aren't doing what those did. They didn't have the connectivity as those movies used to have. But I think what Star Wars is kind of not seeing, I feel, is the fact that they are almost out of things they could do. And their shows aren't doing very well. And they're pouring money into things that just aren't making... I don't think they're making money on these shows. I think they're losing money. So I don't see what their goal is. But I think that's all. I think that's really all to say about this discussion. I just kind of wanted to talk my thoughts about this because I don't think I've ever made... I think the last video I ever made talking about, like, Disney Star Wars, I think it was in my Kenobi review in 2022, and I think that was the only time I have. Because I've never spoken about any of the sequel movies. I've never spoken about any of the prequel movies. I never spoke about any of the original trilogy. And I never did a Mandalorian review. I never did Book of Boba Fett. I never did Andor. Yeah, this is pretty much like my first time really doing a real Star Wars show discussion. But I just really thought this would be an interesting thing I wanted to spread my thoughts about it because I think something like Ahsoka, which I think they did some very interesting things, I'm not going to lie. How they tied in Rebels and how they brought this really interesting side of the universe actually into the show. But even that, it felt like it was trying to do fan service. Because, again, it was Anakin. It was trying to pay things to the prequels and original trilogy. And I feel like that's what Star Wars has become. It's become a cameo fest and fan service more than an actual show. And I think that's all I have to say. Besides, I thank you guys so much for watching this video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.